We just get another batch of heroin. 5 minutes later, my girlfriend had to come in. She kicked the door in, found me blue on the floor, dead, taking my last breath. She let the people of the house know what was going on, and they dragged my body down 3 flights of stairs and left me on the sidewalk to die. And I stand before you now, a changed man, a changed person. I love my life. I love the people in my life. Life is an amazing thing, clean and sober. But I wouldn't be clean and sober if it wasn't for the Narcan. So again, I am the evidence.
Good evening. Testimonials like the one that we just witnessed are why we're here tonight. I want to welcome you, first of all, to the University of Findlay. I'm Dr. Joyce Jackson. I'm an assistant professor in the College of Health Professions here, and also the faculty advisor for our university's I Am Enough group. Tracy will explain a little bit more about what I Am Enough does later. I also want to recognize a few other people that aren't necessarily on your program, but are in attendance tonight, and those persons would be, and if they would just kind of stand and wave so that we can locate you. From the University of Findlay's counseling services, we have Jenny Williams and Karen Westrick. Also from the Cosiano Health Center, we have Julie Yingling, Natalie Schrader, and Chris Vermillion. Any of these ladies are available at any point tonight or after the presentation. Should you have a desire to talk with someone, please seek one of them out. A very important person here on campus this year with our I Am Enough group has been our student president of our I Am Enough, Tracy Willis, who is a senior social work major. And Tracy is going to provide a bit of a testimonial herself, but she's also going to talk to you a little bit more about why we're here.
Hey everyone, I just want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. It means a lot to me. As Joyce said, my name is Tracy Willis. I'm a senior social work major, political science minor here at the University of Findlay. So as she mentioned, I am the representative of UF's I Am Enough tonight. And I kind of want to explain a little bit about what the student organization is. It was actually just developed this academic year. Joyce and I actually worked together, and we developed this throughout the summer, and we brought it to campus. Some of the things that we worked on have really just been about promoting what the organization is and making sure that we're known on campus. The thing about I Am Enough that I get a lot is, what is it? What does I Am Enough mean? And typically I just give this simple definition that, it is all about promoting healthy lifestyles. We have connections to community resources, a lot of which are here tonight. And we're here to assist you, and we're here to make known that you are, appreciated and you are welcome. But even broader than that, I Am Enough is, dependent upon the individual. I Am Enough is what makes you get up in the morning. It's what inspires you to go out and try something different. When Joyce and I made this, it really got me thinking, why am I enough? And it depends on a lot of things. Growing up, my family was always, I think I had a pretty good childhood, but it was pretty average. I grew up, I had 2 older brothers. I was obviously my parents' favorite. It was a good life. It still is a good life. But another huge part of me that is the part that created this event and advocated for I Am Enough on campus kind of took place after 2011. My brother, Mike Willis, actually passed away. After his death, I did a couple presentations and drug forums regarding advocacy and making individuals aware that just aware. I mean, a lot of people think of overdose and they don't tie it in with somebody in particular. It's just, there's a stigma associated with it. And my duty, kind of, I felt at that time, was to break that stigma and to rebuild his reputation. Because when you hear that somebody died of a drug overdose, you don't think, I mean, it doesn't always get tied as close to home as it should. My brother, I mean, the worst part about this entire situation, it wasn't the fact that, I mean, an overdose is entirely avoidable. You know, that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was knowing that there was something out there and that not everything that could have been done was done. Naloxone was never accessed. My brother, he was a college graduate. He's the first person in my family to get a college degree. He had just gotten his dream job in South Carolina. He had double majored in business. He was on the dean's list. I mean, he was a great, great man. He returned back to my hometown in Mansfield, and within the first 24 hours of arrival, he met up with his best friend of 7, almost 8 years, and he was dead of a heroin overdose. And it wasn't, sadly, that wasn't the worst part about hearing that. I was 18 years old, and I just heard my brother die of a heroin overdose, having never been an addict before. The worst part was knowing that naloxone was available and that his best friend of 8 years left him in the car to die for 4 hours. That his best friend stole money out of his wallet. He moved the body to the passenger seat of the car. He poured salt water down his throat thinking that that would revive him. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was knowing that naloxone was available, but it was never used. The best friend never called for help because he was afraid that he would get in trouble. The important thing about tonight to remember is that this could really happen to anybody. And if we don't make naloxone available, I mean, there's gonna be more people like me who not only are tortured with the idea that they lost somebody to an overdose, but they lost somebody to an overdose and not everything was done that could have been. And that's kind of what I want to touch upon, and that's why today happened, and that's why it's so important. I'm actually going to welcome another woman who's going to give a testimony. Her name is Sarah.
Hello. First of all, I'm extremely nervous, so bear with me. I want to speak to you about Todd. Todd was my husband. Todd was the father of two beautiful little boys, and Todd was an addict of 10 years. Todd lost his addiction, or his battle with addiction on May 27th of 2015. The sad part about it is he was incarcerated for a week. We thought he was doing great. He wanted to spend time with my boys. He was at his mom's house. I gave him an opportunity to spend time with my boys. I got a phone call at 7:02 in the morning from my 8-year-old saying that his dad wouldn't wake up. So I knew, gut feeling that something wasn't right. I drove down there, walked in to Todd laying on the floor, 2 little boys standing next to him, and I knew he was gone. I knew that Todd lost that battle. Sorry. Todd struggled with addiction for many, many, many years. And he was a good guy. He was funny. He loved his kids. But it wasn't enough. So, I'm sorry. It's hard. I'm kind of going to walk you through exactly what happened. 7:02, I get that phone call. Walk in there. There's Todd, 2 little boys. I checked his heartbeat. There was no heartbeat. He was cold. I checked his wrist. There was no heartbeat, and I knew. I just panicked. I started screaming and screaming. Go to the phone. I called 911. They asked me to do CPR. So I tried to perform CPR on him, and it was too late. But, only thing I ask is, if anybody out there is struggling, don't be a statistic. Don't be a number. Fight if you can. Don't be Todd. Don't leave behind, 2 little boys and a wife. I have to look at them every day. They have to ask for their dad every day. Tell me how much they miss him. So please, I'm begging you, if you have a problem, get help. It's out there. I promise, it's out there. I know more now than what I did before. But thank you.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Sarah, for kind of setting the tone for why we're here once again tonight, for being transparent and allowing us into your lives and your stories. The next event on our program, or speaker on our program, I would like to introduce to you State Representative Robert Sprague. He will be speaking, basically giving us an overview of the problem as it exists right now, and also addressing some of the legislature. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joyce. I got to tell you, Tracy, great job on this. I was going throughout campus. It's amazing how many flyers you put up. Hasn't she done a wonderful job with this event? We're grateful for her pulling this together. Also, we want to acknowledge some of our sponsors for this event. Zach Thomas down here with the Adams Board. Zach, if you just wave your hand there with the Adams Board. Our local Adams Board does a lot. We appreciate their help with this event, don't we? Oops, excuse me. Sorry, I think tried to laser you there, so my apologies. The best way to describe this epidemic, and so I guess we are going to talk about a couple of the statistics. It's very personal, but the statistics are also scary. The best way to describe this to people in about 30 seconds is to walk them through these slides. This is the state of Ohio in 2001. And you can see the percentages of each county's admissions for opiate addiction. So you can see in 2001, the problem is mostly focused on Cuyahoga County and the Cleveland area, Franklin County, which is Columbus, Montgomery County, which is Dayton, and then in Scioto County, down near the West Virginia border. 2 years later, this map changes, and you can see it begin to expand out of the urban areas. 2 years later, in 2005, you can begin to see it's taking over not just the urban areas, but also the suburbs surrounding the urban areas. 2 years later, in 2007, you can see it begins to grow. In 2009, it's grown further. And in 2011, the last date that we have for this slide, it's pretty much taken over the entire state of Ohio. This is a good bullet point slide, and I could probably walk through all these, but you got to just use your head for just a second. Follow me here. 10 years ago, we really didn't have a pervasive heroin problem. So why do we have a heroin problem today? What has changed in the last 10 years? Well, it's really very simple. The bottom line here, the area under the curve, so to speak, this area right here, or the number of opiate prescriptions written out of our medical system, the narcotics coming out of our medical system. Anybody name a narcotic pill coming out of our medical system? Anyone? Some examples. Nobody knows? Percocet, Vicodin. What did you say? Tramadol. Oxycontin. Opana. Yeah, you got it. So Those are the usual culprits, and plus a whole bunch of other ones that I can't even pronounce. In a lot of cases, you get some of these prescriptions and you don't even know that they're narcotics because they're fancy name. I mean, Dr. Milks could tell me that they were narcotic, but I wouldn't know necessarily that they were narcotic. And what has happened over the last 10 years is we've dramatically increased the amount of narcotics prescriptions coming out of our medical system, and you're seeing a commensurate, almost lockstep rise in the number of overdose deaths. And that is this line right here. You can see it rising almost in lockstep. Last year, in the state of Ohio, we had 2,482 people die of a drug overdose death. That is far and away the leading cause of accidental death in the state of Ohio, far surpassing traffic accidents. Yeah, this is a slide that breaks out the type of overdose deaths, what people die from in terms of overdose deaths in the state of Ohio over a sequenced number of years. You can see total overdoses has gone up, but you can also see it broken out between heroin and prescription narcotics. What do you think has led to the increase in heroin overdose deaths from 2011 to 2013? Anybody? It's one word. Fentanyl. And fentanyl is not the fentanyl that's manufactured in the United States. This is illicit fentanyl that's actually manufactured illegally in Mexico and brought across the border. In many cases, from what I'm told, is that when heroin dealers get a weak batch of heroin, they will lace it with fentanyl, which is about 50 times stronger than heroin, in order to get rid of that batch and be able to sell it. Other people sell it as kind of like a trademark, that their drug is the best, their drug is the strongest. They sell it as blue drop heroin. And whenever you see a large number of overdoses, say we had 12, I believe, in Marion about 3 months ago, it's always related to a batch of fentanyl-laced heroin. I want to talk a little bit about the current legislation, but really focus here on the Good Samaritan bill. The Good Samaritan bill, and I can't remember if it was, maybe Tracy mentioned it. You know, a lot of cases people are afraid to call 911 because they're afraid that they're going to get in trouble to help somebody with an overdose. Right now we have legislation pending in the Ohio House that would create a Good Samaritan law where people would have immunity if they call 911 and save somebody else's life. Another bill that we're proposing here is we actually have much safer narcotics on the market now. As you probably know, 80% of the people that become addicted to heroin don't start by going to a party and using a syringe. They start by taking a pill. And as they take that pill, they take that prescription narcotic. Look, you know, 20 years ago, there used to be a moat around heroin. It was known as a dirty, awful drug. And the moat around heroin was the syringe. Nobody wanted to use a syringe to have a good time and stick their arm with a needle. The bridge over that moat has been these prescription narcotics. And in a lot of cases, people don't even think that they're dangerous to abuse. They go to a party, they're drinking some beer, having a good time with their friends. Somebody introduces them to have them take a pill or two. Of course, the alcohol is that benzo is widening the mu receptor in your brain, allowing you to suck down more of that opiate and get a much more sustained high and a sustained buzz. In other cases, people simply abuse them because they were prescribed these medications and they like the effect and they begin taking more of it. Once they begin taking more of it, then they begin chewing it to get the immediate release of these medications to their brain, and then they progress to crushing the pills and snorting them, or crushing them and dissolving them in water and injecting them. Now, they have some safer narcotics on the market now, which are called abuse deterrent formulation drugs, and they prevent the narcotic from being crushed. Some of them act like a jelly bean. You can imagine crushing a jelly bean and then trying to snort that. You know, it doesn't work. Some of them act like a rock. The rock gets broken into, several chunks, and again, that's very difficult to abuse. The key here is the insurance companies don't want to pay for these narcotics because they're more expensive. And so we have a bill that would mandate that the insurance companies pay for these safer narcotics, which we think will take some of the rungs out of the ladder as people progress in their addiction. And then the second thing is, at the end of the day, we've just got to cut down on the number of opiates that are being overprescribed in the state of Ohio. We need to cut down on the number of opiates that are being overprescribed in the state of Ohio. Because that's the root of all this, quite frankly. And one of the ways that we're attempting to do that at the State House is to put a prior authorization in place. The insurance companies use prior authorization to control procedures for just about anything. You try to go get a knee replacement, the insurance company is going to send that through a prior authorization to make sure that the knee replacement is necessary. How about if we start using that for narcotics, make sure that the narcotics are safely prescribed? So that's what that bill does. We have a lot of other bills that I could talk about, but I want to get to the good stuff, which is the naloxone training. So, and then we could also talk a little bit about some of the recently enacted laws, but I'll just touch on two of these. The first is, I don't know if you saw in the Courier, I think maybe it was yesterday or the day before, it had a picture of the pharmacist on there checking the ORS system. And we have this prescription monitoring system in the state of Ohio that we're now mandating that medical professionals check. It's a good clinical tool anyways, but mandating that they check to make sure that people aren't doctor shopping, because what people do is go to one doctor and get a prescription and then go to the next doctor and get another prescription. And so we're trying to close down that chain of custody. Another thing we're doing is really trying to educate kids in K through 12 schools, because in a lot of cases, kids think that the prescription narcotics are safe to abuse, and they don't realize that it leads to heroin addiction as their addiction deepens and progresses. So those are some of the things that we have done recently, in addition to trying to fill many of the gaps within our treatment system. I could go on and on about this for probably about 20 minutes, but I know that's not why you're here tonight. And then finally, I wanted to just touch briefly about the naloxone policy. One of the reasons that we're able to have events like this and make sure that everybody gets access to naloxone is because naloxone is a prescription medication, and so you normally wouldn't be able to get it from a doctor without a prescription from that doctor. But what we've done with House Bill 4 was a bill that we passed last year this time, and what it does is it allows you as an individual to walk into any pharmacy who has a standing order from a physician, and the pharmacist will take you through the steps and show you how to use the naloxone according to the physician's standing order, standing prescription, and you can gain access to naloxone and you can have that kit. So if you have a loved one, a friend, somebody that's struggling with an addiction, you can help them by going into your local pharmacy. And I got to give a shout out here to our corporate partners. CVS and Kroger and Walgreens are now carrying and stocking naloxone in their pharmacies. Isn't that great? And so, could we please, is there a representative from Kroger here? Could you please stand up? We'd like to thank you for doing that, Kroger. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Is there a representative from Walgreens here as well? Walgreens? Would you stand up? Thank you for doing that. And there's a representative from CVS. Thank you. You're all back there together. All right. Talking about, this is really going to save lives, and we really appreciate what you've done as corporations to make that possible in our state. And I'm supposed to take any questions if anybody has questions for me. No? Very good. Then we will get. Go ahead. Go ahead. No, it's.
I just wanted to thank you. I'm a member of the Harford County Recovery Board, and have great amount of success with Butyl, and we're very excited to be able to participate with this.
Thank you very much. Just very briefly. If you're struggling with an addiction such as heroin or opiates, maybe I'll let probably Dr. Bundy's better talking about this than I am, but there's a number of things that you need to have in order to get better, and one of them that's very helpful is medication-assisted treatment, because you have to either occupy the mu receptor in your body or you've got to cover it, because it's a very physical addiction, and any of you who know somebody with an addiction, an opiate addiction, know how physical it is. And this medication-assisted treatment like Vivitrol is one of the keys to success we've noticed statewide. And one of the things we did in Hardin County was fund a pilot program there along with their drug courts, because we've noticed that people have a high degree of success if they are compelled by the court to go through the various stages of treatment. And that's very successful, and Hardin County is leading the way in the state of Ohio in doing that. So, any other questions? Very good, thank you.
Next on our program, we have Dr. Brad Bundy from the Blanchard Valley Health System. Dr. Bundy will be speaking with us concerning the understanding of really this addiction model.
Can you hear me okay? We've been moving around some. I appreciate the testimonials. I work over at the psychiatric unit at the hospital, and a lot of good people, really good people I've seen struggle with the addictions, and I can just imagine your loss. And I don't know how many of the rest of you know someone, a loved one, maybe even yourself, who struggle with addiction, and really struggle trying to understand it. Seeing behaviors going from productive, good behaviors to destructive, bad behaviors, and losing either yourself or someone you care about to the addiction. How do you figure that out? How do you understand it? Well, the way you understand it, and it is understandable, is understanding the disease model of addiction. It's an illness. People in neuroscience, psychiatry, neurology have known this for a while. And now the rest of the scientific medical community also is understanding it and endorsing it. This is from the New England Journal of Medicine, Neurobiological Advances from the Brain Disease Model of Addiction. It is an illness. It's an illness. And the reason it's important to understand that, to let go of the stigma that's attached. All right? They're not bad people. All right? They have an illness. And I'm going to try to help you maybe understand that. To understand the disease model of addiction, you got to understand a little bit about the brain. I love this picture. It's a brain scan. It's called diffusion tensor imaging, and it shows some of the connections between the brain. We're learning so much about the brain right now. It's just amazing. We're just scratching the surface. In real life, the brain's not quite that good looking. Anybody recognize this brain? Anybody know this brain? Somebody's seen my lecture before. That's Albert Einstein's brain, all right? And actually a little bit smaller than the normal brain, but it had a great connection between the two hemispheres. It's called the corpus callosum, and that's where we think maybe it's creativity. The brain weighs about 3 pounds. It's about 2% of our body mass, 2%. And it consumes about 20% of our blood flow. Food, oxygen, energy, 20% goes to this 2% of the brain because it runs the show. The brain is the most amazing, the most complicated, the most important thing in our known universe. So, to understand the brain, we're getting all kind of functional imaging, brain scans. There's tons of money going into this to understand more about all this. The people who are invested most are marketers, trying to figure out how to influence your behaviors. But we're trying to understand it too. Now, we'll never fully comprehend our brains. We never will. But simplistically, we can comprehend what brains do. What brains do is take in information. Part of the information our brain takes in is what's going on around us, what we hear, see, feel, taste, smell, we take in through our senses. And then the other information our brain takes in is what's going on with the rest of our body. Our heart, our stomach, pain, that flows up to our brain. And what our brain does is take that information, process that information through 100 billion neurons. The neurons are the main workhorse cell of the brain. 100 billion neurons, which have 100 trillion connections, synapses. There's some other cells up there to help out, but the neurons are the main guys, 100 billion of them, all right? Information in, processing all that information through what's called the synapse. The synapse is a gap between brain cells. What happens is a message starts down one brain cell, it comes to the end, and there's a gap next to the other brain cell, and it releases these biochemical pellets. They're called neurotransmitters that go across this gap and hit enough receptor sites on the next cell to send the message on. It's all about these messages going back and forth. 100 billion neurons, 100 trillion connections, hard to imagine. I'm going to do my microphone at the head thing. Some people have heard this, my patients have. I'll use an example here. And with this example, try to think, how many of you have seen Inside Out? People seen Inside Out? Great movie, right? All right, try to think a little bit of Inside Out while I do this. If I took my cell phone, it's a little bit bigger, and threw it at you, The retina, the cells in the back of your eye, the retinal cells, little nerve cells, will pick up the photons. It's the energy of light bouncing off of my cell phone, the energy. It takes that information of the cell phone coming at you and convert it into little electrical data impulses that go into the brain. First part of the brain it goes into is the thalamus. Those little brain cells monitor information coming in. Most of the information coming in isn't that important. Maybe the light flickering, someone out there coughing, maybe someone over here snoring. But every once in a while, some information comes in that's deemed important because little brain cells that are hooked up to memory bank circuitry realize cell phone hitting hit hurts. So they put a big alert on that because that information is going elsewhere. It's going to little brain cells that are involved with motivation, decision to engage in behavior. That part of the brain we think is called the anterior cingulate gyrus. Those little brain cells that get the information, cell phone's coming, they go, hey, cell phone's coming, yeah, should we do something? Yeah, you probably should, it probably hurt us. So what are we going to do? I don't know, we're going to cry, we're going to fall over, what are we going to do? And little brain cells hooked up to memory bank circuitry are yelling at these guys saying, we know what you do, you block the cup, it worked before, block the cup. You go, oh, block the cup. Because this information is going elsewhere. It's going to little brain cells to get us ready to do something, to engage in behavior. That's emotional circuitry to some degree. Get your body tense, your heart beating faster, because that information is going to little brain cells that orchestrate muscular movement. When I scratch my head, the engineering feat, the muscles here, to get my finger here, not here, not here, here with this touch. Oh man, all these little guys are working away, all these little brain cells, right? And while that's going on, cell phone's still coming at you, right? I tell my patients this. Here's a new guy on the job back in the thalamus monitoring the cup. He's running around screaming, oh, the cup's coming on, or the cell phone's coming, what are we going to do? And there's an old pro working there, neuron brain cell, that says, relax, we got it covered. All these other circuits and channels are doing their job. We got it covered. At the right moment, buttons push, you block the cup, or block the cell phone, right? The reason I go through that, two things. One, all that information processing, billions of neurons, trillions of connections happens like that. But here's the important part. It all happens unconsciously. You wouldn't consciously drive any of that information processing or behavior out. You wouldn't think, oh, the cup may hurt me, maybe I should scream or cry, block with this, I move my elbow this way. It all happened unconsciously. Information in, behaviors out throughout the course of the day. That's what our brain does. And the vast majority, if not to some degree all the behaviors we engage in, are unconsciously driven. When we walk, when we drive a car, me talking here, I'm not stringing each word together consciously. Unconscious circuitry kind of runs the show. So conscious awareness, willpower, what's that do? We think it plays a role, but I tell you what, it's just one player up there. And usually it's not powerful enough to combat some of these other circuits and channels, because I'm going to show you the most powerful circuit and channel in the brain, right here. It's called the seeking reward circuit, the seeking reward circuit. Probably the most powerful circuit in our brain, unconscious circuit. And it does what it sounds like it would do. It seeks stuff out. Our brain seeks things out in our environment they think is good for us, for our brain, for us. Seeks things out. And a lot of it has to do with survival. And when the brain gets something that it thinks is good for it, it gives itself a little reward. It's a neurotransmitter called dopamine. Little reward because they want you to do it more. Seek it out more. Okay? Seeking reward circuit. I'll go over some of this circuitry maybe a little bit later if you want to hear about it. But that's the circuit. Down here, it's called the ventral tegmental area. That's where we make a neurotransmitter called dopamine. The nucleus accumbens right up here is where the little reward happens. Right here, the amygdala, that's part of our emotional circuitry. And then way up on top, that's the neocortex. That's where a lot of memory circuitry is. And I'll try to make reference to that. Seeking reward circuit. Now, what triggers that? What stimulates that? Well, things that are probably good for us. Food does. Seeking food, get a little reward. And kind of besides sugar, I'm going after sugar. High fructose corn syrup. No pop. Anybody drinking pop in here? No pop. Oh, sorry. Okay, enjoy it. Because you can't have any more after this. Food triggers it. Sugar triggers it. What else triggers it? Sometimes sex does. And again, procreation maybe. That helps survival. Brain might think it's a good thing. What else really triggers this seeking reward circuit is social connection, interacting with people. And think about that. When we interact with somebody, socially, we're a social creature. In a way, our survival chances go up. So the brain knows that's good. What else triggers this circuit? Knowledge. You learn something, it's going to help your survival. The brain's happy about that because you get a little reward. What else triggers this circuit and channel right here? Seeking reward circuit. Substances of abuse, addictive substances. and they trigger it the most. They cause the most release of this neurotransmitter called dopamine. And people probably wonder, well, why would a substance of abuse, alcohol, cocaine, opioids, heroin, why would it trigger that? Well, think about it. When people, what's alcohol do? Kind of calms people down a little bit, right? When you're less calm, your blood pressure goes down, and you may interact a little bit better with people. So the brain kind of misperceives that as a good thing. Cocaine, what's cocaine do? Sometimes it helps out with attention circuitry a little bit, so the brain thinks, well, maybe that's a good thing too. All right? The reward, big reward with this stuff. And then the opioids. Heroin in particular, the pain pills. Think about it. Pain goes down, you're a little more attentive, and sometimes it actually calms people a little bit, they're a little more relaxed. So the brain misperceives it as a reward or a good thing, and it rewards us. But the problem is these substance abuse are so powerful, they cause such a release of these neurotransmitters, they take over the circuit, they hijack it. And when that happens, a couple bad things happen. Number one, the circuit, it's called down regulation. Remember we talked about these receptor sites, message down one brain cell, the synapse, neurotransmitters go across, we think it's dopamine, it's receptor sites. Well, sometimes it's too much of a good thing. Happens, so the circuitry, this is all mechanical, kind of readjusts. They reduce the receptor sites. I think I did break this thing. The circuitry down regulates, reduces the receptor sites on the one cell. So it's not getting stimulated as much, but when this down regulation happens, it's kind of like tolerance. The stuff that used to trigger it, food, social connection, knowledge, it's not powerful enough. And this circuit has to be triggered. It's not powerful enough. What's the only thing powerful enough to trigger it? The substance of abuse. It's called craving. It's different from withdrawal. Withdrawal is kind of immediate effect getting off a substance like alcohol or an opioid. Craving's different. It's this circuitry up here, and it can last a long time, a long time. And that's why people, 3-6 months sobriety, 9 months, they still sometimes relapse because this circuitry is so powerful, it's just taken over. And we know there's a genetic component to some degree. There's some people, unfortunately, that are born at risk for this. Okay? It runs in families. So it's a disease, it's an illness. And it's important to understand that so you don't stigmatize people that go through this. Because it could happen to any of you out there to some degree. You got a genetic risk, it's even more of a chance happening. And the people, they're good people. They just have an illness. How am I doing on time here? One thing I want to mention, if you want to understand about the naloxone, this is the circuitry up here. Up on top, it's called the neocortex. That's where the memory circuitry is. It's pretty interesting up there. But one of the things we found out with addictions is that it's almost the seeking that's as rewarding as getting the substance. And what triggers this seeking is anything that reminds the brain of the substance. And those are called cues, those memories, cues. And people that maybe you used with, or situations you used with, music you associated with it. Any of that stuff gets the brain wanting to seek it again. So that's why it's so important if you're struggling with addiction that you try to get away from all those influences, all those cues. Now, the other thing to keep in mind when you're trying to understand about naloxone, I talked about all this circuitry up here, right? The seeking reward circuitry right down here in the brainstem, the medulla. That circuitry down there, a part of it is respiration, breathing, unconscious circuitry, right? And that gets hit by the opioids. And it downregulates. When we're getting too much, it downregulates. And one of the reasons people are overdosing so much is because they get off for a while. And that circuitry upregulates. And then they get a dose of heroin, perhaps, they took before, and it's too much, and it knocks it out. Just briefly, I'm doing okay time-wise, getting off here if I need to get off. I've got a few more minutes. Okay, medication assistance, just briefly. And kind of aside, Representative Sprague, I can't thank him enough for what he's been doing, really. He met with some docs, myself included, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, and was asking, he's trying to understand, what's going on with all this, And to his credit, he not only listened to us, telling about the disease model, but he's embraced and really done a lot of good work for that. So thanks, Thank you. Okay, medication assistance. Well, there's two things that are used, if you're curious. One is called an agonist, giving this system, this reward circuit, the drug. It's called Suboxone or methadone. so that you're not seeking it all the time. Is that me or? Okay. So not seeking it all the time. That's Suboxone, all right? If you've heard of that. The other thing is Vivitrol. It just kind of blocks that circuit from working. And we're trying to figure out who does better with what. It's still a work in progress. We're trying to learn more. Okay, I think. Anyway, everybody out there, we need your help, okay, with this. Any questions? Good. I think I made it. I think I broke this. I think I might have. Okay, thank you.
Well, you know what? That was me, right?
Thank you, Dr. Bundy. Next up, we have Dr. Michael Milks and Chris Hart from the University of Findlay College of Pharmacy. They're going to speak with us a bit about the chemistry and pharmacology of not just naloxone, but also heroin, because if we didn't understand that, we wouldn't understand how naloxone actually works. So, welcome.
It's a mistake giving a PhD the podium. 39 slides later, just try to get me off. So, anyhow, here we go. Hey, a couple things that I want to try to get across to you is just get your head around heroin, the problem. We know it, but let's know it just a little bit better. Let's take a look at the language opium, opiates, and opioids. You could sort of put them all in one bucket, but to a pharmacist, they're specific chemicals that all have similar actions, but they're different. They're different chemicals, but they have the same action. So that's what you do. I want to talk about the receptors. And Representative Sprague even mentioned the receptors. Dr. Bundy mentioned the receptors. The receptors are the way that these drugs talk to our biochemistry and bring us to our knees as far as that craving, that absolute capitulation to needing that drug. Are you guys picking me up okay? I can stand back here, but it's so, this is confining. Anyhow, all right. And then I want us to look at the structures of morphine, heroin, and naloxone. And you'll see that, thank you, I am mobile again. We will see how incredibly similar these chemicals are, and it's no wonder they're hitting the same receptors, maybe with a little bit different effect. But we'll come out and we'll just feel a little bit more enlightened as to why OxyContin and heroin cause this powerful activation, and naloxone gets in the way and says, ain't happening on my watch. And that just breaks that whole circuit, that whole cycle. All right. So you should already know, if you don't, some of the prominent signs and symptoms of heroin. We're not going to dwell on that. The emergency medical antidote, though, naloxone, that's what I want you to come to know. And then, of course, what do you want to look for if you administer this naloxone? What do you want to be on guard for? Yes, you want to save that person's life, but look out, because they may wake up totally disoriented, totally angry, and they want to flee the scene lest they get arrested. So you want to be careful. Have your wits about you. But you want to save that life. Absolutely, you want to save that life. Okay, so what's in a name? There's some names for you. A lot of enticing street names that suggest that heroin is something edgy, cool. Let's go there. Here's a case of heroin chic. We've seen this of Madison Avenue fashion. And then here's my favorite slide, heroin not so chic. You don't see a lot of this advertising done, but this is where we can end up with the addiction. That craving is so powerful, so difficult to resist. So here's the chemical structure of heroin. Now, before you go for the doors, don't worry. Just take a look at that molecule. Kind of take a mental image. You've got a couple of these rings and some oxygens, and what, if you're at all inclined to chemistry, you might recognize this as acetic acid, vinegar. So we put a couple vinegar molecules on morphine, and boom, we've got heroin. It doesn't take much, but we have a molecule that more easily penetrates the brain, gets to the site where the receptors are, and then we've got all sorts of fireworks. Diacetylmorphine. The chemistry is every bit as easy as that, those two acetyl groups. And then there's naloxone. Who in here does not see the similarities there? Pretty darn easy to pick up, isn't it? And what this molecule is going to do, though, it's going to bind to these receptors, and instead of activating the receptors, like these other two agonist drugs, naloxone is going to say, no access. Occupado. You can't get there and activate it. So there's a little bit of chemical difference. There's the name, this N-allele. For the any chemistry majors in here? I know we get some pharmacy people. That's good. At least I can talk to my people a little bit. But here we've got N-allele, oxone, and this extra hydroxyl group. So that's where we get the name naloxone. It speaks to us. It tells us a little bit, reminds us a little bit about that chemistry. I know, the rest of you can go to sleep now. That's okay. That's all the chemistry that we really need to know. But here's the question. Now, wait a minute. Why do we have these receptors in the first place? Did we really need to have receptors for a plant poison? Morphine? Opium itself is just this resin. There's one opium poppy field. Here's another one you may recall. Same idea. But opium is this latex ooze that comes from the unripe seed pod of the opium poppy. And you can see that this material here is oozing out. That's collected the next day. It turns a little bit reddish orange as it dries out. And that dried material is opium. It has in it lots of morphine, along with some other alkaloids. And it's that morphine that is so powerful in the opium. Well, with the onset of chemistry, we were able to isolate the morphine, we were able to derivatize the morphine, we were able to come up with all these nifty drugs that, because they all have that morphine structure, we call them opiates. Opioid, like fentanyl, has a different chemical structure, but it still binds to the same receptor. And we'll take just a real quick look at that. And then narcotic is just a term that we can talk about sometime later. Here are some street names, different products. Not a lot we need to know from there that you don't already know. Heroin, of course, is chemically modified morphine. There's morphine. You'll not find a better analgesic than morphine. It's an exceptional drug. It is a Schedule II controlled substance, which means it's the highest concern among any prescribed agents. Schedule I is lots of concern, but they're all illegal. Schedule II is right up there with all these other molecules. All right, there's our diacetylmorphine. Here is Bayer, when they came out with this diacetylmorphine back in the late 1800s. They also came out with aspirin. So they actually put heroin on the market as a wonderful pain reliever. They suggested maybe it was less addictive than morphine. I think they got that one wrong. But at least we're still benefiting from the aspirin part. All right, so there you go. Schedule I. Here's what it looks like, and you would not know right off just looking that this is 40% heroin. It looks like a piece of tar. It's called black tar. Here's a whole bunch of different colors, and you wouldn't know by looking at them whether you've got a small amount of heroin or a huge amount of heroin. And of course, it takes all this sophisticated equipment here to be able to inhale the fumes of heroin. I think we can skip this part. There's a lot of bad things, both short-term and long-term. We understand the problems with heroin abuse. It's really the death that can take and snuff out your life so quickly. And that's what we're here tonight for, is how do you save those lives so that you can rehabilitate that person, that sacred human being. You got to give them a chance. You got to give them a chance. Anyhow, this reiterates what Representative Sprague said, really, just how terrible things have gotten with heroin and the abuse, and then you throw fentanyl in there, and it's a mess. Here's fentanyl, different structure, doesn't look anything like morphine, but you put it in three-dimensional space, and it binds to this receptor and activates it, and life is awesome. Until you need some more, and some more. And then you take too much, and then you stop breathing, and then life isn't so grand anymore. But let me ask you this. Why do we have heroin receptors? Why do we have mu opioid receptors to a plant poison? Do you ever wonder? Why do we have biologic docking molecular structures that morphine will bind to? So like Dorothy, you can fall asleep if you're trying to trot on out to Oz. Interesting, no? Any runners in here? Any diehard runners? You got up this morning and you ran, or you exercised to the point of exhilaration? What do you call that? Runner's high. What drives that? Enkephalins and endorphins, yes? We have these receptors because our body makes these teeny little proteins, polypeptides, that activate those receptors. And they give you that sense of well-being, and they regulate stressful, painful circumstances. So it's a good thing we've got these mu receptors, yes? It's a good thing, unless we abuse them. So here's what the mu opioid receptors will do. They'll cause a number of very characteristic effects, and you can tell an opiate user by the list of signs and symptoms. And we're going to come back to that later when we're talking about when to administer naloxone. There's our structures. I'll try to mainline this a little bit, no pun intended, but to get us going here. Here are the products that are currently available. We've always had, since 1971, we've had injectable Narcan. And then there was generics that came on, and pretty soon the brand name innovators said, yeah, we're not making enough money on Narcan, we're just going to give it up to the generics. So Narcan as a commercial product fell off, but everyone still called it Narcan. And so I was so pleased when the product Narcan was actually brought back on as a brand name product, because now you can call naloxone Narcan, and there actually is a product called Narcan. Now that's a peculiarity to a pharmacist maybe, but naloxone is Narcan, and vice versa. One's a brand name and one's a generic name. All right. Let's wind down here a little bit. Here's our opioid. Could be fentanyl, could be heroin, could be morphine, could be enkephalins, endorphins. Binding to and activating receptors, and you end up with the drug-seeking reinforcement, drug dependence, and it actually can cause some dysphoria. We don't have time to talk about kappa receptors, but there's some neat stuff about the naltrexone piece and those kappa receptors, the Vivitrol piece. All right, so naloxone comes in and says, nope, not on my watch, and the rest is history, right? You save that person's life. You cut out the respiratory depression, and it saves that person's life. Couple things we need to watch for. Here is an absolutely shameless advertisement for what the University of Findlay has done for the health department. Get the ball rolling, and the corporate sponsors, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you very much, because we are going to make a difference here. Narcan nasal spray, such an easy thing to do. 4 milligrams sprayed up your nose, one nostril, boom, that's it. You use the whole amount, one spray. You don't prime it, you just put it in the nose and insert it and spray it. A couple things you want to watch out for, though. Maybe that one application isn't going to save that person. If they still end up not breathing, what do you do? What do you do? Well, CPR is good, yes. And if you happen to have another Narcan, give them that 2 to 3 minutes later. And if that doesn't work and you happen to have another one, give them that if it doesn't work. Fentanyl is pretty resistant. You have to give a lot of naloxone to reverse the fentanyl. And remember, people are putting fentanyl in our heroin. And so you just keep giving the naloxone until the emergency medical team gets there, and then you turn it over to the professionals. Make sense? Does that make sense? What's nice about naloxone is it has very few serious side effects at all. So you don't have to worry about overdosing them on naloxone. Disorientation when they wake up, be prepared for that. You may instigate or precipitate withdrawal in that patient by blocking their receptors. Now they go into heroin withdrawal. If they were addicted, if they were physically dependent before, now you're going to bring on that withdrawal. Be prepared to attend to that patient in those terms. Agitation, aggressiveness, they're concerned about getting arrested, and most importantly, the patient is miraculously revived, breathing, alert, and everyone thinks, oh, life is grand, let's just go on party hardy. And naloxone wears off, and 20 minutes later, that patient slips back down into unconsciousness and coma and maybe death. So for people to think that their part is done when they administer that one dose of naloxone, please make sure that people understand 911 still, because that patient is going to lapse back into overdose depending on the dose and the drug that they were intoxicated with. All right, believe it or not, I'm done. Chris believes it. I do want to call Chris up. He's got a few more words to share with us. And Chris and I go way, way back. A couple months anyhow, huh, Chris? So we won't say when we graduated. So
maybe just a little bit. Now, you stay up here, because they might ask me about one of those ring questions, and I'm in big trouble, because it's been a long time. No, I don't need a clicker, because they only trusted me with one slide. So that's all I get. So I don't have to. That's it. That's all I get, one thing. I just wanted to let you know that my name is Chris, and I'm a recovering opiate addict. And we've heard tonight about the brain. We've heard about the structure of the drugs. And I just wanted to take just a minute and tell you what, from somebody who's been there, done that. Why would you do that? Because it feels so good. It feels so good time after time after time. And as we build up tolerance, my body wanted more, and it wanted more. So I upped the dose. And that's what an addict does. We up the dose, because we're chasing that high that we had that very first time. And so we continue, and I'm going to share with you and my sympathy to your loss. But I'm going to tell you something. Your loved ones, we didn't do it. And I've come close to needing Narcan many times. But we weren't, it wasn't about that we were trying to hurt you. We probably didn't, our brain was changed. We didn't know what we were doing. We just wanted to feel good. We just wanted to feel good. And so know that. Please know that. But if you know somebody that's struggling, or you have somebody, you can make a difference. You can, because the drugs changed my brain. I wasn't thinking clearly. We get into situations and you go, how could you have done this? Well, as they've all alluded, it changes the way we think. And so if you care enough, just be enough, make a difference. And again, because we need you. We need you. Thank you.
questions for Chris or me? Anyone? I can put the structures back up. So Tracy. Yeah, the controversy, and Tracy, I'm assuming that you mean, why should we save someone's life if they didn't care enough to take care of themselves? And, I feel very strongly that we are all flawed human beings. And if redemption comes from within or from your friends or from your Lord, if redemption can come to you, why not give that person a chance? You cannot redeem a dead addict. End of my statements. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, because a lot of us are to that point where we wish we weren't where we were. Okay, for whatever reason we got started, now we can't stop. It's not that, we didn't care enough, it's we can't care. The drugs have taken over. So in this case, we need people to help and care.
Other questions? Yes. Oh, sorry. I think it's new enough, and maybe I'll defer to the medical expert in the field, but my gut reaction is yes. There should be one for the addict. There should be one for family members. There should be one at the schools. There should be accessible naloxone, because it very likely could be that 1 4 milligram dose up your nose is not going to be sufficient, especially if fentanyl is involved. Dr. Bundy, you want to add anything? You said, okay. And then we had a question up front. I think there's a range of personal reaction to it. I don't think it causes as much amnesia as some of the other drugs, but I'm sure that if you see someone, well, they can stumble. They tend to just want to slump and sleep. Yeah.
No, there's some people, and again, medication assistance, they're getting the drug, and they're going about their life. It's the right dose. Too much dose is the opposite. But with the right dose for their brain, they'll be fine. That makes sense. They'll function well.
Thanks, Dr. Bundy. Yes, and as Dr. Bundy pointed out, it's dose-related, it's agent-related, and it's individual-specific. So there's quite a variability there. Good question. There was one, okay, yes.
What's the shelf life of naloxone, and what's the cost? So you guys have seen that you have some stocks.
Yeah, the cost is not too bad. We're in the $50 range. Does that sound about right? No? But state-provided systems, we're trying to bring that down for schools to $37.50 or something like that, wasn't it?
To get an overdose kit, the cost is about $75.
Okay. And then shelf life, I'm guessing it's probably 2 years. Yeah. Thanks, John. Anyone else? Yes. Okay, so
Nice segue.
yes, maybe this is time to hand off the microphone. So, Joyce, thank you very much.
Actually, it was a great segue, because we have with us now Barb Wilhelm actually she's the Deputy Health Commissioner for Hancock Public Health, and she's actually going to be talking more about the actual training, the actual use of naloxone.
Thank you. Project Dawn is a community-based overdose education and naloxone distribution program that's been in the state for several years now. Dawn is an acronym that stands for Deaths Avoided with Naloxone. And we know that naloxone's been used to reverse opiate overdoses for over 40 years very safely. So it's a safe and effective way to reduce the effects of an opiate overdose. And legislation that was passed, thanks in part to Robert here last summer, allowed us to make naloxone more available in the community, so it is now available without a prescription. I'm going to show a video. I think that's the best way to kind of walk you through how the kit is used. It's a video that was put together by the Ohio Department of Health's Project Dawn program, and it is a couple of years old. Dr. Wims knows no longer the head of the Ohio Department of Health, and there are a couple of statistics that need to be updated, but the rest of it is very pertinent into how you use these kits. I use the same video. We do have a Project Dawn program at the health department, and I use the same video with people when they come in. We like to take the time with people, walk them through the kit. I think of it a little bit as how it was when AEDs, the automatic external defibrillators, first came out. People thought that's too technical, it's too medical, I don't have the training, I can't use it. So we want people to be very comfortable when they use the kits so that you can see that they are fairly safe, and fairly easy to use. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you the video now so that you can see how that's put together.
Leslie was born October the 20th, 1974. A very happy, good child, loved people, enjoyed, never met a stranger a day in her life. At age 8, they had to do an emergency surgery on her to replace her patella. At age 10, Leslie had her tonsils, adenoids, and appendix out. At age 13, she had another surgery. At that young age is when I believe that Leslie's addiction began. She had gotten married and God had blessed her with a little boy. When he was 10 months old, she had to have a complete hysterectomy. 2 months after that, her husband was electrocuted and there was more pain medication. That's when her addiction became full-blown. From 2000 until 2006, Leslie had 5 knee surgeries, all prescription pain medication that was given to her by a doctor. I feel that if someone had addressed Leslie's addiction, she may still be with me today. I got the phone call at 8:30 in the morning that my daughter was dead. The autopsy report showed that the cause of death was the toxic effects of drugs.
An overdose occurs when a toxic amount of a drug or a combination of drugs overwhelms the body and causes it to shut down. Even though you can technically overdose on any kind of drug, I'd like to focus on the most dangerous and common substances that people in our state misuse and abuse, opioids. Opioids include both heroin and prescription pain medications. Opioid pain medications are often prescribed for conditions that cause moderate to severe pain, such as arthritis, lupus, cancers, and chronic back pain. Some common opioid pain medications include hydrocodone, which includes brand names like Lorcet and Vicodin, oxycodone, which includes brand names like Percocet. There are also longer-acting opioids such as OxyContin, MS-Contin, methadone, and a patch form called fentanyl or Duragesic. Other brand-named opioids include Opana ER, Avinza, and Cadian. Remember, heroin is also an opioid. Opioid overdoses occur when there are so many opioids or a combination of opioids and other drugs in the body, it causes the victim to stop breathing. This occurs because opioids fit into specific parts of the brain that affect a person's ability to breathe. This is why rescue breathing is a critical step when responding to a potential opioid overdose.
Symptoms of an overdose include breathing is very slow and shallow, less than 10 breaths per minute, erratic or has stopped. Face is pale or clammy. Fingernails and lips turn blue or purplish black. For lighter skinned people, the skin tone turns bluish purple, For darker skinned people, it turns grayish or ashen. Choking sounds or snore-like gurgling noise, sometimes called the death rattle, vomiting, loss of consciousness, unresponsive to outside stimulus such as a loud noise or sternum rub. Pulse or heartbeat is slow, erratic, or has stopped. If someone is making unfamiliar sounds while sleeping, it is worth trying to wake him or her up. Many loved ones of users think a person was snoring when in fact the person was experiencing an overdose. These situations are a missed opportunity to intervene and save a life. If a person is exhibiting signs of opioid overdose, these following life-saving measures should be taken immediately. Step 1. Assess the signs. Is the person breathing? Is the person responsive? Does he or she answer when you shake them or call their name? Can the person speak? What is the skin color? Are the lips and fingernails blue? Step 2 is to use stimulation. If unresponsive, try to stimulate with mild pain or by rubbing your knuckles into the sternum, the place in the middle of your chest where your ribs meet. Step 3, call 911. If the person does not respond to a sternum rub, treat this as an emergency situation and call 911. It is vital that you call 911 in the event of an overdose. People who survive an overdose are at risk for other health complications as a result of the overdose. When you call 911, simply say, "Someone has stopped breathing and is unresponsive." Step 4. Perform rescue breathing. Rescue breathing is one of the most important steps in preventing an overdose death. The difference between survival and death in an opioid overdose depends on how quickly enough oxygen gets into the person's body. These are the steps for rescue breathing. Place the person on their back. Tilt their head up to open their airway. Check to see if there is anything in their mouth blocking their airway, such as gum, a toothpick, undissolved pills, a syringe cap, or a cheeked fentanyl patch. Plug their nose with one hand and give 2 even, regular-sized breaths. Blow enough air into their lungs to make their chest rise. If you don't see their chest rise out of the corner of your eye, tilt the head back more and make sure you're plugging their nose. Breathe again. Give 1 breath every 5 seconds. Step 5. Administer naloxone. Naloxone blocks the effects of opioids and stops opioid overdoses. Naloxone is a very safe medication used by paramedics in the field for years. If it is not an opioid overdose, you're not going to hurt them by giving them the naloxone. Naloxone does not reverse overdoses that are caused by non-opioid drugs such as cocaine, benzodiazepines such as Xanax, Klonopin, and Valium, methamphetamines, or alcohol. After calling 911, do rescue breathing for a few quick breaths if the person is not breathing. Next, assemble the nasal spray naloxone. Pull or pry off the caps on the needleless syringe. Pry off the cap on the naloxone. Affix the nasal adapter to the needleless syringe. Grip the clear plastic wings on the nasal adapter and screw the capsule of naloxone into the barrel of the syringe. Next, tilt the head back and insert the white cone into the nostril. Then spray half of the naloxone up one side of the nose, 1 cc, and half up the other side of the nose, the last cc. If there is no breathing or breathing continues to be shallow, continue to perform rescue breathing for them while waiting for the naloxone to take effect. If there is no change in 2 to 5 minutes, administer another dose of naloxone and continue to perform rescue breathing. It may take up to 8 minutes for the naloxone to take effect. The naloxone might wake them up, but the naloxone might also wear off and the narcotic prescription could kick in and stop their breathing, so it is still important that you get EMS to the scene as soon as possible. Naloxone wears off after 30 to 60 minutes. Step 6. If the victim awakens and begins breathing on their own, turn them onto their left side, known as the recovery position. This helps the suspected overdose victim to breathe more easily. Follow these steps to put the person in the recovery position. Bend one arm to keep them from rolling onto his or her stomach. Gently roll the person onto his or her left side. Tilt his or her head back and tuck the top hand under the chin. Bend the leg to support the position. This is the position you want to keep the person in until EMS arrives. If there is an incident where your naloxone had to be used, is lost, or has expired, contact Project Dawn at the number on your screen, and we can instruct you on how to get your refill. We want to ensure that you have the proper overdose reversal tools.
Many overdoses occur when people mix heroin or prescription opioids with sedatives such as alcohol or benzodiazepines such as Xanax, Klonopin, Valium, and Ativan. Mixing alcohol or benzodiazepines with opioids is particularly dangerous because, like opioids, these substances also impact an individual's ability to breathe. Make sure you do not mix alcohol or benzodiazepines with opioids. Tolerance is your body's ability to process a drug. Tolerance changes over time so that you need more of a drug to feel its effects. But tolerance can lower quickly. An individual's tolerance is usually lowered after getting out of jail, the hospital, or a drug treatment program. In fact, individuals who come out of jail are 7 times more likely to overdose in the first 2 weeks after being released. Make sure to use caution when you are sick or you haven't used. Even a few days of abstinence or decreased use can lower your tolerance. For individuals treating chronic pain with prescription opioids, adjusting your dose without doctor supervision can put you at higher risk of overdose. Particularly with long-acting opioids such as methadone or OxyContin, increasing your dose by even 1 pill can increase your risk of overdose. Be sure to consult a doctor before changing the dosage of your opioid pain medication. Your physical health impacts your body's ability to manage opioids. Anyone who uses opioids, including people who take opioids for chronic pain, should be aware of increased overdose risk if they have any of the following health risk factors: kidney or liver disease or dysfunction, heart disease, HIV/AIDS, if they smoke or have COPD, emphysema, asthma, sleep apnea, respiratory infection, or any other respiratory disease.
Our son, Carl Culbertson, he was our firstborn son. We have 6 children. He started giving into peer pressures as a young teen, a little bit of alcohol, and then it just kept progressing. Pills and pot, ecstasy, LSD, heroin, and heroin ended up being his drug of choice. We found a treatment center in Jackson, Mississippi, which we were really thrilled with, and had good success there. Cleaned for 1.5 years, then brought back to Ohio. where his triggers and dealers were, and he fought the addiction, but their addictions are so powerful. Carl was living with us, and he overdosed upstairs in his bedroom, and just by chance we heard him groaning and like gasping for air, somewhat lifeless on his bed, and we immediately called the squad. I started trying to give him mouth to mouth, and there could not get a pulse. I'll never, of course, forget that moment and the helpless feeling. You could hear the sirens coming in the background, but they don't come quick enough. And I'm trying to breathe life into him, and that's all I knew to do. He hung on for 2 days in a coma, basically brain dead, and we finally lost him after 2 days. No parent should have to bury their child. It's not a natural thing. And with proper training with naloxone, what we went through and are still going through hopefully can be prevented for other families.
Did you know that more than 70% of individuals who misuse prescription opioids obtain the drug they most recently used from a friend or family member? Never share your medications with other people. Never take a medication not prescribed to you. You do not want to be responsible for putting another at increased risk for overdose death. Always dispose of unused or expired medications. Prescription medications should always be stored out of the sight and reach of children, teens, and anyone who might misuse them. Lock medications in a safe or in a secure cabinet. Prescription drug abuse is an epidemic that is affecting our entire community, but together we can help stop it.
If you've made the decision that you would like to seek addiction treatment for opioid drugs, there is help available. For referrals to addiction treatment in your area, please call the number on your screen. New medications are now available for detox and treatment of opioid addiction.
As I mentioned before, we use this video for training when people come in to get a naloxone kit. And I include one of these videos in the kit so that you can take it home, you can refresh your memory if you haven't had to use it and you're not sure of it. You can share it with other family members or other friends. And we provide the kits through the Project Dawn program to anybody who thinks they might be in a position to help in an overdose. I do want to note a couple of things from the film, and as Mike had said before, it's very, very important that you call 911 if you're in the situation where there's an overdose. Somebody asked if we have more than one dose, and in the kits that we do provide 2 doses. So, there's this limited amount of time there. You need to get help, professional help, on the way there as soon as you can. Also, the video talked about rescue breathing. John's going to be talking a little bit more about CPR, but we do put a barrier device in each of our kits because sometimes in an overdose someone may have vomited, or it may be somebody you don't know as well, and you may be hesitant to do mouth-to-mouth on them. So we include a barrier device, something that kind of gives you some protection when you're doing CPR. It's important to note that naloxone kits are not the answer to the opiate problem. It's just a way to keep somebody alive until we can help them get the treatment that they need. And part of what I do at the health department when people come in, there was an 800 number at the end of this film, but we have a lot of local resources too that I try to talk to the family about what kind of treatment there is or what kind of resources they might need as well. The video talks about prescription overdoses, and that's kind of what kicked off, I think, the Project Dawn program. But as we've heard all night, heroin is an opiate, and this also is effective against heroin. We do have kits available at the Hancock Public Health Department. We recently combined the Findlay City and the Hancock County Health Department, and we are now called Hancock Public Health. Any of the phone numbers will get you to the correct health department, and we can help you with that. The kits for our costs are about $75 to $85 when we put a kit together. We can bill insurance, but we have to bill the insurance of the person who comes in and gets the kit, not the person whom the kit is eventually used for. We do want to try to do everything we can to make that kit available regardless of your ability to pay. The University of Findlay did give us a generous donation to get that started, and we just partnered with the university and the Adamus board to submit a proposal to the state for some additional funding. We do also accept donations if people come in, but our basic premise is we want to make sure we get a kit into the hands of anybody who wants it regardless of their ability to pay. And as was also said, naloxone is also available at the pharmacies as well. Are there any questions for me? We can bill the insurance without a prescription. I don't know if one of the retail pharmacies could address that. Whether or not the retail pharmacies would bill insurance, and they can. Any other questions? Thank you.
It disappeared. As Barb mentioned, the next piece of information that we want to talk about is the importance of CPR, and clearly from the video we understand that just the naloxone itself is not enough, and so we do need to be equipped with that. So John Stanovich, who is a registered pharmacist and also the Assistant Dean of Pharmacy at the University of Findlay, is going to share a little bit of information for us on CPR and first aid.
Thank you. Who has the slide? Thank you. Well, what happened here? Yeah, I was looking though to see. It didn't look like the slide came out. What happened to all of the material that was in it? There it goes. That makes it a lot easier. Yes, thank you. Well, you know, first of all, I've given you a handout. It should be at your seat where I have, and by the way, I need to tell you right up front, this handout has not been vetted through the process of peer reviewed. It has not been published anywhere. I had difficulty finding a flow diagram or a flow sheet to distribute to people, so I developed my own. So I want to, first of all, make sure that you understand that this is what I have developed. The second thing is I'm probably going to say a couple of things that are in direct conflict with what was presented earlier, because I have a different opinion and different perspective on the way you address a patient. First of all, let me say to you that, and I do strongly recommend a barrier device. You are going to exchange spit with people. You are possibly going to exchange bodily fluids. So I do recommend strongly that you have a barrier device, and I also strongly recommend that you have a pair of gloves, rubber gloves. And I think gloves are provided in the naloxone kit itself. What I want to give you is I want to give you enough information so that you can keep somebody alive for 15 minutes. I want to give you enough information that you can keep somebody alive for 15 to 20 minutes, whatever it takes for emergency personnel to get there to take over this patient that you've been dealing with. First of all, let me talk to you a little bit, and you've heard it over and over again, an opiate overdose. And this is strictly for an opiate overdose, okay? Cardiopulmonary resuscitation, which is CPR, is really more designed for a patient who has a cardiac event where their heart is no longer beating, its rhythm has been disturbed. They're either in ventricular fibrillation or they're in what's called asystole, where the heart stops. So CPR is more specific for a cardiac event. And as you heard earlier, most of the time with an opiate overdose, you're talking about the effect of the opiate on the respiratory system. Its effect, as Dr. Bundy, by the way, Dr. Bundy and I have the same barber. We also use the same devices for projecting our voices. But if you look at the fact that the opiates work upon that part of the brain that controls respiration. So in most cases, you have a patient who's not breathing, okay? And you have to remember that when you come upon a patient, and again, a lot of times these are your friends, and what we're assuming here is that you're coming upon a patient who's had an opiate overdose. And you're somebody probably that you know, because you're really talking about a family or friend that you're probably dealing with in this situation. So it is important for you when you come upon the patient that you start, the first thing that you want to do is assess the patient. Well, let's kind of take a look here. And the reason that I put this together is because I wanted you to have something to take away from this. First of all, showing the recovery position so that you had something that you could put in your home to use, to refer to. But let's say that you come upon a patient, and when you come upon this patient, this person that you know, let's say that they are still able to talk to you, but their speech is slurred. Let's say that they are somewhat lethargic, lack energy. You check their respirations, and their respirations are really slow. If you come upon that situation, what's the first thing you want to do? Pardon me? Why do you want to call 911? Right. In other words, this patient is somewhat alert, somewhat breathing on their own, somewhat conscious. Okay, that's great. I recommend you call 911 immediately because you do not know at what stage you've come upon this patient. You don't know, number one, how much they've taken. You don't know what route they've administered it by. You don't know how long ago they took the dose. If you come upon this patient and it's been 5 minutes since they took the overdose, they are probably going to still be able to talk to you. They'll be somewhat coherent, somewhat conscious. And so it's not such a difficult situation. So if you look on the handout itself, and this is very difficult to read, I'm telling you from up here even. I don't see how you could even see it, but hopefully you have the handout in your hands. But if you do, call 911 right away, okay? And then what you want to do is make sure that you're able to go to the patient and check their airway, okay? And also to make sure that you have a clear and open airway in the patient, all right? Let's say that happens, okay, that you do and you're able to stay with them. Put them in the recovery position, okay? Put them in the recovery position. What's the next thing that you'll want to possibly do? If you have naloxone in the home, what do you want to do? Get it. Go and get it. If you need to leave the patient at any time, make sure you put them in the recovery position. Always put them in the recovery position. Why do you want to put them in the recovery position? Anybody help me here? Pardon? In case they vomit. Absolutely. Patients who have ingested a large amount of an opiate, if they've taken it orally, it does cause nausea and vomiting. You don't want them laying on their back, because if they're laying on their back and they vomit, what do you think they're going to do? Choke. Also, what they might possibly do is aspirate it, pull it back into their lungs. So you need to put them in the recovery position. Let's say that you go and get the naloxone, and this patient was alert at the time that you first started this process, but all of a sudden now slips and is unconscious, and breathing has slowed even more. What do you want to do? You have the naloxone, you've called 911, what do you want to do? Give them the naloxone immediately. Give them the naloxone. in fact, even here, if they're awake and they're conscious and you observe them for a period of time, have that naloxone ready because you don't know what's going to happen. The other thing you don't know is what they've taken. You're not sure if they've mixed it, as mentioned. Have they taken it with alcohol? Have they taken it with a benzodiazepine like Valium or Xanax? If they have, and you push the naloxone, it'll reverse the opioid, but it will not reverse the alcohol, effects of the alcohol, and it will not reverse the effects of the benzodiazepine. So here's where you are as far as administering the naloxone. You've got to a point where you have checked their airway. If there's something in their airway, what should you do? Pardon? Remove it. That's right. If it's vomit, what do? Do you try to remove it with them laying on their back, with their head, with their mouth to the ceiling? You turn your head. You turn their head and turn their body, stick your finger in their mouth, and remove whatever is there. There may be tablets, there may be vomit, and that's why we say have gloves. Even if it's your loved one, you're talking about an opiate addict. You know, they may have had, you don't know what their behavior has been, you don't know really what kind of diseases they've been exposed to that can be transmitted through bodily fluids. So turn their head, put them on their side, and remove whatever is in their mouth, okay? So if you are at this point in time where you have administered the dose of naloxone, let's say that you administer it, the patient begins to wake up, okay? And they're breathing on their own. They still have a pulse. We'll talk a little bit about no pulse over here. But they have a pulse. They're breathing on their own, which means their heart is beating. And they start to slip again. They start to go back into unconscious state. What do you want to do? What's that? Absolutely. Administer another dose of naloxone. That is the drug that's going to buy you time, okay, till the emergency personnel are able to get to you. And what we're trying to do here is give you the tools and give you the information necessary in order to keep this person alive until emergency personnel have arrived, okay? That's what we're trying to do. That's the major focus of this, okay? Let's say, for example, you have a patient. Now, again, a lot of times they say when you come upon a patient, and if you look into their eyes, you can tell that they've overdosed on an opiate. How can you tell by looking in their eyes? Anybody know? No, opposite way. Pinpoint pupils. Pupils have constricted. Now, you think about that and you think, well, that's a pretty good diagnostic. Well, maybe, maybe not. If you've caught them early on in the process, sure, their pupils will be constricted. But if they have been there for a period of time, and if they have been there for a prolonged period of time, you probably have, and again, Dr. Bundy mentioned the idea that the brain, getting oxygen to the brain is extremely important. And if they have been without oxygen for a long period of time, you're not going to see pinpoint pupils. So forget even looking for the pupils. I wouldn't even do that, to be quite honest with you. But if, for example, they have been down for a long period of time, and they're at the point where they have been without oxygen for a long period of time, there is a strong possibility that they will have an irregular heartbeat or no heartbeat if they've been without oxygen. And when you get to that point, if you get over here and you check for a pulse, where do you check for a pulse at? Anybody know where you check? Right there, right? The carotid. You check the carotid for a pulse. You know, you should test this on yourself so you can find your carotid artery. That's where you want to check for a pulse. If they have no pulse, the next thing that you need to do in the process is begin standard compressions, and you need to do, this is where you need formal training in CPR. And I encourage every one of you to go through formal training to be able to administer CPR, because if you're at this point where there is no pulse, okay, and you are here and you needed to start compressions, airway, and breathing, then the thing that you'll want to do is be able to do that and at the same time begin this process down in here. If you've administered a dose here, and then you come over here and you check that there's no pulse, you need to begin chest compressions. Because if the heart is stopped, that means there's no blood flowing to the rest of the body. And if there's no blood flowing to what does blood carry? What is the main thing that blood carries? Oxygen. And if you don't have oxygen, if you haven't been able to do that, and you're not in the process of getting blood to those organs with oxygen, you need to begin that process. The other thing is, for example, rescue breathing. I've failed to mention that, but it's an important part of the process that after you have administered the naloxone that you do rescue breathing. You saw the view. You put your fingers on the bony part of the chin here. You tilt the chin back. Why do you have to tilt the chin back? Anybody know? Open the airway. Exactly. You get that chin pushed back so that you can open the airway, and you begin rescue breathing for that person. Particularly in the standpoint if you don't get an immediate response from the naloxone. So if you get no pulse, you come down in this area here, you begin to do chest compressions, and then you administer a second dose of naloxone. Now again, between here and here, we're really talking about 3 or 4 minutes. Okay, we're not talking about a lot of time. This whole thing, you're talking about a 3 or 4 minute period of time. So it is important to understand that. If you look over here, again, if there is a pulse, you check the airway again. It's not uncommon to make sure that you check the airway frequently, and then you start rescue breathing, okay, for this patient, and then you look down here and administer a second dose of naloxone if you feel that it's necessary. It's very difficult to draw for you a perfect scenario because each one is going to be different. So you need to be able to react to these different patients in different stages in different drugs that they may potentially have taken. So after you administer the second dose of naloxone, whenever the patient awakes and whenever the patient is breathing on their own and you don't leave them, okay, put them in the recovery position. Put them as shown in the video and is up here on the diagram. Put them in the recovery position. It's important that you do that. Some things to remember. Number one, stay calm. Stay with the patient. If you must leave, put them in the recovery position. Overdoses may happen in 1 to 3 hours. You know, there's a period of time here, you know, where overdoses and the symptoms that you're going to see may be over a range of 1 to 3 hours, or maybe very, very quickly. If it's fentanyl cut heroin, it's going to be, and it's injected, you know, and it's a dose that somebody is hit after they have been in treatment for a period of time where they're off of the drug, it'll be very, very quick. A couple of other things real quick. One of the things that they mentioned is to do a sternal rub to try and stimulate the patient and wake them up when you assess them initially. Talk to the patient. One of the things you need to do is talk to the patient. There is enough evidence out there that states if you know the patient's name, call them by name. That auditory stimulus is helpful in keeping that patient intact and engaged. So make sure you use that as a mechanism for talking to the patient. Things not to do real quickly. For goodness sakes, don't try to put them in a shower, okay? Don't try and drag them, wake them up. Don't slap them like you've seen in the movies. Don't inject the person with any substance, milk, speed, heroin. The only thing that is safe and effective is naloxone. Don't try to make the patient vomit. Even though they've taken an oral product, don't make them vomit because that gag reflex is gone and they will aspirate, okay? Any questions? Yes?
Say you find the person, they tell you what they've taken, and you can see they're going to overdose, but they're still conscious. You give the drug at that point?
If they have ingested amount, I would stay with them to observe them for a period of time. I would probably call 911 first, then I would observe that patient for a period of time. If you see a change in their consciousness or their breathing to the point where you believe that the naloxone should be administered, then administer it. They'll probably resist it until they've gotten to a stage where you'll be able to do it. Yes? Thank you. Thank you very much. Oops, yes.
So, can you tell us, where, or maybe any of the panelists can answer this, but where do you get a naloxone kit now in Findlay, Ohio? Is there a standing order from a prescriber for the CVS and the Kroger and the Walgreens? Can you walk into the health department and get it? Where can you walk in and get a naloxone kit?
And Barb, you can correct me, but in the health department, they can walk in at any point in time because it's under Dr. Mills. You have an agreement in place?
Yeah, we have standing orders in place at the health department. I do recommend that you call, oh, thank you. I do recommend that you call first, because if you just stop by, the right people might not be there. And I like to take the time to go through the whole kit, make sure you understand it and have all the information that you need. So they are available at the health department.
CVS, Kroger, or Walgreens, my guess is you probably have a standing order in place with a physician. Is that correct? That is correct. And if a patient comes in, you have that standing order, you have that consult agreement and standing order in place that you can dispense to that patient. Are there any specific requirements that you have when that patient come in? Is there something specific that they need to tell you and meet as far as dispensing that naloxone? No, there's not.
With Walgreens, every patient is to be counseled whenever they take that out, so that is mandatory for their pharmacist to do. My store personally has been just signed and have been counseled.
Thank you. Yes.
I have a question. I realize I am from Kent County, but I am from Allen County. Can I ask where, I can vouch for the fact that Walgreens in Allen County in Lima, Ohio does not do naloxone, or has not had it on the premises. So I'm just asking for somebody who's out of the county, or, you know, where can you recommend we go?
I do believe that naloxone is available in Allen County. I'm not sure if it's through the health department, but I do know that it's through, I think, the local, also through the local Adams board. I saw something on television just the other night. But let me ask the CVS and the CVS and Walgreens, do you have it available in Allen County?
Lima, Ohio was where I asked.
Pardon me? Yes.
I mean, I probably asked a month ago and they said no. So.
When did you get it put in, please?
2 weeks ago, all pharmacies really started getting it in, so within the past 10 days, we're all the ones who are being stocked.
Okay, thank you. 2 weeks ago. Yes.
So as far as the billing, if you go in and you ask for a kit and you present your insurance card, do you ask for more than one kit then? Because I'm still feeling like one kit's not enough. So I guess if I ask for one kit, is that going to cost me any money up front and then you bill insurance? And then that's my second question. So the first question was, can I get more than one kit on insurance? And the second question is, how much do I have to pay up front?
I'm going to ask, I guess, defer to the CVS, Walgreens, Kroger contingency to field that question.
So, good question. So what happens is you come in and it's almost like filling a normal prescription. So you're going to come in, except you won't have that paper copy, or it's almost like the doctor's called in one, kind of imaginary called in one. So it's a standing order. So when you come in, you just simply ask for an naloxone kit. The kit does come with 2 doses automatically. So when we fill the prescription, the normal filling prescription will come across, and as my colleague stated earlier, you will be counseled. It's mandatory counseling on it. So if you would like another kit, you would have to go through the process again. 9 times out of 10, I can pretty much guarantee you that your insurance will reject it. It is up to you to pay cash for it. That's perfectly your choice, but it really is dependent upon your insurance. Some insurances will pay for a kit, turn around and pay for another kit. Some insurances won't. So it really is based on your insurance. Yes, ma'am.
Is it also going to be available in like Orange County?
It should be available anywhere where there's, I know for Kroger, Walgreens, and CVS, any pharmacy in Ohio should be able to order it. The problem was there was a pricing discrepancy, and so all the major retailers couldn't get it in from the manufacturer. So that's why it's just been that past 7 to 10 days is why we've been, but now we can order it and get it in now. Yeah. And that's a great point you just brought up. It would really be in your best interest to call your pharmacy and just make sure that, because some people may want to use the nasal dosage versus the injection because they feel that that's easier. And so some of the pharmacies may have just ordered the injection in. And so it may be in your best interest to call and say, hey, will you please order the nasal dosage for me? And so usually it's usually a 24-hour turnaround when the order comes in. For some it may be 48 hours, but at least There are. The injection, it depends. The injection is slightly more than the nasal spray. And there's actually 2 brands of nasal sprays out. One brand of nasal spray is more expensive than the other. However, I believe it's not better. It's almost kind of like a brand name versus generic, but it's just 2 different manufacturers. But they're they work the exact same. Yes. From what I've seen, and I'll be happy to ask my colleagues, see if they've seen anything different, is it's one kit. So we haven't had the opportunity yet to, and thankfully we haven't had an opportunity where someone buys a kit and then comes back within 30 days to purchase another kit. So I can't comment on that, but we'll continue to try and do what we can. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Can I just add one thing, Tracy? John has talked about CPR classes and training. There is a sign-up sheet available out in the hallway here. If you are not certified in CPR or you just have never taken a CPR course and you're interested, we will certainly hook you up because I know through John or myself as a certified CPR instructor as well, we are certainly willing to offer some courses as needed.
Along with the CPR, the future CPR registration sheets out there, we also have an I Am Enough if you want to register to be on our email list. We are also going to be selling t-shirts in the back, similar to what Sarah was wearing. So if you want to get one of those, they're $10. This event was one of the greatest collaborations I've ever seen. And I want to make sure I give everyone equal admiration. For starters, Skylar, can you stand up and represent student activities? Skylar and Sharinda unfortunately cannot be here. She's our student activities director. But honestly, she is the one. I sent the idea to facilities and student activities. And I was like, hey, I just want to put a naloxone training on campus. And I was expecting 15 people tops. And, as ambitious as that office is, I mean, it's incredible. It's amazing. I also want to give a shout out to PRSSA, who is actually in the back. They're filming tonight, so if anyone wants a copy, please let me know. They are also, I Am Enough is going to create a public service announcement about what we stand for. So if anyone wants to, give a short little quote, I guess, about why they feel that they are enough, please do so. There are also light snacks and water. The Student Government Association at the University of Findlay has donated that along with Sodexo. And the counseling services, they are present. Kosiana is present. Sorry, I went out of order. I also want to give a shout out to all of the organizations who are here, including Hancock Public Health, You're Not Alone, Century Health, Hancock County Opiate Task Force, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Colden and Crates, the Family Resource Center, Focus on Friends, the Adamus Board, and obviously the University of Findlay. Along with that, we have the special thank yous. Tiana, I don't know how to pronounce her last name to be honest. She designed the flyer and the poster, and Irene Martin from the University of Findlay actually put the programs together. And then also, I do want to give a huge shout out to CVS, Kroger, and Walgreens for being present today and doing what they're doing for our communities. If you wouldn't mind, just please fill out the short little 1-minute evaluation. If you would like to invest more time in that, I would highly appreciate it. And then also, the last question says, I feel additional trainings like this should be offered. If you say yes, please suggest what type of trainings you think would be useful. All right, thank you so much.